Todd,
Hi.
just wanted to let you know I'm here, but I'm in my car for the first
Okay.
half hour, so I'll be listening.
All right. Thank you.
I'll make sure we mark you down as present here.
Okay. Okay. Welcome, everyone. This is the State Building Code Council IBC Technical Advisory Group for October 24th, 2024. And please take roll. Thank you.
All right, Chair Primary Todd Bayreuther.
Here.
Thank you. Chair Alternate Roger Haringa just checked in with us. May not be able to say here for this roll call. Architect Primary Joe Mayo.
Here.
Thank you. Alternate Che Fortaleza. Not seeing them in the room today. Building Official Primary Tim Woodard.
Here.
Thank you. Alternate Steve Belzak. I think I see Steve on here. Steve, if you're trying to signal us, I see your hand marked as here. Fire Services Representative Primary Lance Dahl.
Here.
Thank you. Cities and Counties Primary Hoyt Jeter. Don't believe he's with us today. Affordable Housing Representative Primary Todd Sullivan. Not seeing them in the room. General Contractor or Developer Primary Bill Mybush. Don't see them with us today. Manufacturer Supplier Primary Brian Horseman. Also not online. Structural Engineer Primary Joshua Mergens. Not seeing them today. Alternate Trent Tenney. Seeing them. Building Owner Property Manager Primary Brett Conway. Don't see them online. General Public Subject Matter Expert Primary Michael Barth.
Here.
Thank you. For the alternate Leah Summer. Don't see them online. State Enforcement Agency Primary Paul Clark.
Here.
Thank you. And Fire Protection Engineer Primary Andy Leonto.
Here.
Thank you. With that, we are shy of a quorum by 1 seat.
Okay. Well, we will keep moving here and we'll see if we get that last seat before we actually jump into the main items here. So we're going to skip over. Well, let me just finish off. Anyone from the public like to be recognized on this call? Go ahead, Patrick.
Yes, thank you. This is Patrick Hanks with the Building Industry Association of Washington.
You're welcome. Anyone else, including the proponents?
Hello.
The Karsten, sorry?
Yeah, this is Karsten. I'm representing myself.
Okay, thank you. Micah?
Micah Chappelle, Technical Code Development Manager for Seattle Department of Construction and Inspections. Also WABO's Technical Code Development Committee Chair, and I have a couple of proposals on the list today. Thanks.
Thank you, Micah. Okay, with that, without quorum, we'll move into item 4. Is there would anyone from the public like to comment on something not on the agenda? Okay, hearing none. So without a quorum, we can't take action, but I'll raise it to the tag if everyone's comfortable moving into proposal 5 here, which is actually petition 090. Or would you like to do something else and hear from proponents that are online? I think we're open. We can't officially change the agenda, but we'll be sensitive to everyone's time here. And then Mike and others, are there others that I know are down at ICC? Is there any constraints here that we need to think about in the way we've laid out this agenda?
I'm flexible, so thanks
Okay.
for asking, but I can be here and let them go first.
Thank you, Micah. Okay, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, as I was noticing you were taking roll, I think some people did, maybe somebody else, who you called out may be in. I can't,
There's a couple
So maybe
people that
recheck
came
it.
in after the roll call, like Jay Fortaleza, she's here, but that seat was represented in our quorum count. So I'm still reviewing the attendees list here, and we're still one seat shy of quorum at the moment.
Okay.
Or Andy's here now. Nope, sorry, he was here previously. I was jumping at it, sorry.
Yes, sorry, I came in like a minute after, and I'm alternate for Joe Mayo.
That's okay.
So since he's here,
Yeah, Joe's here.
Okay. Okay, well, we'll get it. Somebody will join here. Before we jump in here to number 090, Dustin, I think the next schedule here is on next Thursday, a week from today, right?
Yeah, the 31st.
Okay, so we're gonna pick up where we left off. We tabled the previous petition. So now there are a couple bigger ones out there that are tabled, and we'll reschedule those, you know, and try to dedicate time so that when we know we'll have a lot of input on those, we'll try to give very specific times, but it's at least next Thursday or beyond, right?
Yeah, we're not gonna finish up next week, and so at this point, I don't think that we'll be ready with the petition's recommendation for adoption or not adoption in time for the committee meeting in November,
Okay.
which is scheduled for the 8th, and then the council meeting the next week after that. My math is bad, so the 15th, I think, is what it is. And so it's looking like we will need to schedule a special council meeting to address just these proposals being approved for recommendation for adoption, and staff drafting CR 102 after a December meeting that addresses specifically that. So, you know, we're not pigeonholed just yet, but we're shaving down over the sincere hope is to get this done before legislative session, so that we don't have too many overlapping things happening at once.
Okay, that's a good goal and that's realistic. So it's a big lift. Thank you.
Yes.
So if everyone's understands that the couple of proposals that we've tabled that come to mind are the EPD LCA one, and then the last one we heard was the horizontal separation. And I know groups are working in that in the background. What other one am I forgetting off the top of my head?
The embodied car, no, we talked about
That's the
embodied
one.
car,
Yeah,
and
I
there's hold on, let me pop up my list of tabled proposals here.
And it's okay. I didn't mean to get in the weeds on it, but I just wanted to make sure everyone's collectively tracking that. We're going to try to get through what we'll call the first readings here and take action if we can on all these proposals. And we're still in the middle of that. So
The other
Or we
group
revisit
of
things that are tabled.
proposals tabled are the electric vehicle charging infrastructure proposals.
right. That's
There's a
right.
group of
Okay.
those.
I forgot about that. Okay. So is everyone okay with that on the tag that we keep those tabled until we get through the first reading and action on the other ones?
Yeah, I am. Lansdale.
Okay. Let me know if you have any, or Dustin know if you have any other objection to that.
I don't have any objection to keeping those tabled. I didn't put them on the agenda just because we hadn't coordinated with the proponents there. But one thing I was considering for proposal to the group is we could still, you know, we intend to talk about the proposals before us here today. I think we can make modifications to them. We just can't take the action on them.
Yeah.
And the intent of the group anyway was any modified proposal that was modified during one of our meetings would have one last chance to be reviewed again for final recommendation for adoption. And so I was thinking we could pretty much run business as normal, make modifications to the proposals if it's deemed necessary through conversation, post those for final action at a meeting to be determined in the future, sometime in December, and try to just keep the train rolling, even though we can't take that final action.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's a good plan. Thank you, Dustin. Okay. With that, let's move into it then. So we're picking up on 090. I think Joe, you're here. I was listening in, I wasn't sharing if you remember. So does anyone, Joe, do you want to kind of quickly introduce this, and knowing that we're kind of midstream on this discussion?
Yeah, thanks, Todd. This proposal looking at allowing Group E above the 3-hour horizontal separation in Section 510 actually comes out of my own work, having worked recently on 2 K-12 school projects, and in both of those projects, we looked at the code and wondered why we couldn't have Group E above the podium, and those 2 projects would have benefited from it. I also wanted to add that this is not meant to be a double dip with the previous code proposal I submitted. We're reworking that one now, probably to focus that on Group R. So these are intended to be 2 separate, not linked proposals. As a little bit of background here, this would obviously apply to more urban areas and urban schools. For a little bit of background, Seattle Public Schools, the most recent levy, BEX 5, over 80% of the schools in that levy turned out to be 3 stories or taller. So schools are getting taller, land availability is not there. Schools can have really significant area requirements for drop off, as well as parking. Parking is also a neighborhood concern. So pushing people out onto the street can create some distress amongst communities. So how can we provide some of these other features in schools and give schools other options to look at development, and then potentially even open up other sites which might be unfeasible without a provision like this. And then also it might not be parking or drop off in a podium level. It could be the larger A occupancy spaces like gymnasiums or theaters or other large gathering areas. Group E is required to be sprinklered once you have 51 or more occupants. So the building would be above the horizontal assembly would be sprinklered. And then this section of the code already limits Group A, I believe, to an occupant count of 300 or less. So I think that would limit any large Group A occupancies above the horizontal separation. So again, this is really seeing as schools are getting more vertical and land use pressures are going up. Is this something that would be, I think it would be a benefit to school districts, and wanted to discuss it here.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Okay, so with that, we'll open it up for discussion from the TAG or the public. Go ahead, Dustin.
We have Trent Tinney just joined us, so we now have established a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Trent.
Yep. Thanks, Dustin. Sorry I'm late.
You're good.
Thank you. Okay, I see Tim.
And I'm muted instead of unmuting. So I think when I'm looking at this, I just can't help but think about the other tools that are available in the code, based on your construction type and other things. And without knowing the significance of this change, except for, almost a desire to see, a lower class of construction and no study or anything else to kind of substantiate why we would make such a significant change to a code section that's been in there for as long as I've been looking at this section. So I think in order for me to vote in approval of it, I would just need to see maybe why those initial occupancies were chosen over the others, and really kind of have a better understanding of, why we can't use the other tools in the code versus, reducing the construction type or life safety for these occupancies. Thanks.
So Tim, on that point, is there anyone here that knows more about the history of these horizontal separations? I know there's a long history in Seattle back in the 80s in the UBC, and did you want to know more of the origin of, like the limitation on A and so forth, and how that could relate to this kind of proposal? It's not me, so.
Steve Belzak here. I just wanted to concur with Tim. It seems like we're dealing with affordability issues and land use issues, but it seems like the way to address that should be through some other mechanism other than cutting down on life safety factors involved in these projects. So I don't think I would be able to vote for it either. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And Steve and Tim, maybe another question, or Micah. I'm trying to unpack and understand what the increased risk factors are. I mean, can someone kind of speak to that, or Micah, go ahead and make your point?
I don't know if I can speak to that. I know, I do work for Seattle, but I don't have the full history on the podiums. But I know that Seattle code has a lot of additional items that they include for podium buildings, what's allowed over them, and limitations. I was going to bring one of those up. I think Joe mentioned the 300 occupant load for A. I'm not certain that's a state change. I want to say that might be an actual Seattle change.
Yeah, I might have been looking at the wrong code there.
Yeah, I'm looking at the WAC and I'm going, I don't think that's in there. So yes, there are some additional, more robust limitations, I think, in the Seattle code that maybe, Joe, you may want to look at including in this. Again, since folks are asking for some substantiation there, kind of put some barriers on this, some guardrails, as we say. I'm not sure it's quite ready. I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but I think there needs to be some additional guidance. Similar, again, I don't want to say it's only Seattle that does this, but sometimes when we do allow these, things like this, we do ask for more robust items or other limitations to kind of allow this to go forward. So I'm going to be in concurrence with the other code officials and other folks who have spoken, because I think we need a little more substantiation on this before we move forward with it. And I'd be happy to assist with that. I'm sure, other folks that did say the technical code development groups would be happy to help as well. Thanks.
Steve here again. Another thought that came to my mind was, you have school districts that are located outside of urban areas where they do have land, but yet this would be, something that they might want to use, but it may make the situation less safe. And I can see this being more appropriate, like in Seattle or areas where there are severe land limitations. But if we adopted this, I think it would apply everywhere. So just another thought.
Thank you, Steve. Michael.
Just a couple little comments here. First of all, it's 510.2.5 doesn't exist in the 24 code. It should be 510.2 parentheses 5. So minor technicality there in the typo, but to be correct for the site, because it's referring to essentially sentence number 5. On the actual code proposal, I have no real, I really don't care either way on it. I could go either way on it. I guess my question would be, when we're doing state amendments, the part of the criteria we're supposed to use is that it's there's something specific in the state that warrants it. And that's the only question I would have on it is, what makes Washington unique where we need this change here, as opposed to really pushing that change at the national level.
Todd, this is Roger. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Roger.
Sorry, I can't raise my hand and drive at the same time. My question, and I've heard a couple of these comments, and even responding to the last one. I know in the IFC tag, which I'm also a member of, as well as potentially the IBC, that the state of Washington leads the ICC in a lot of provisions, and takes a lot of provisions, some which are adopted in the state of Washington initially or before the ICC acts. So I'm not. I guess it's my thought that, the idea that we have to somehow prove that the state of Washington is different is not a requirement for us to pass something that is different than the ICC. If there is something that makes sense to us in the state of Washington, I don't feel like it's something that has to go all the way through the ICC cycle before we could say, okay. So that's point number one. And point number two, I guess I would ask, there have been a couple of comments that we are making it less safe. I would like some clarity on that from some people that know a little bit more than I do. You know, I'm assuming that the exiting would still be unchanged. And we've said that it is fireproof. So I know as a structural engineer, as I work on podium projects, is the three-story, if that's what we're talking about above a podium. Is that any different than building a three-story building without a podium? So rather than a 4-story, 3/1, is the 3-story structure itself from a fire and safety perspective any different than a 3-story standalone? And I guess I would ask, again, some of the folks that have commented so far, if they could explain that to me a little more.
I could mention just based on a specific project thing, and thanks, Roger, for that. Well, these were specifically, these projects were looking at a 4-story school, so it would have been a 1-story podium, and then if it's a 3-story group E above, you could use type 3A instead of type 3B, which would have meant largely unrated structure versus 1-hour structure above the podium. So they're depending on the building height, it could have some implications for the structural ratings above.
So to be clear, you can build the structure that Joe's describing. The code can't allow it. It just limits what types of occupancies can be built out of certain construction types above the podium. So you're reducing the level of life safety by allowing additional construction types to be used. I feel like Joe basically hit on that.
Go ahead, Micah.
I think Tim and Joe, and I was going to say same thing as I think Joe's pointing out that it comes down to the project specific on this, and you could get there possibly, at least in some sense, without this code change. But I think this needs to probably have a little more study and justification based on if you're talking about what if you have we're talking about a 4-story building, but what if you have a 3-story podium and want to do a 2-story 5B on top of that as an E? I think that would currently be allowed because you can combine the allowances in 510-2 to do that. So at least currently in the state language, I know that we may be a little more restrictive in Seattle, but again, Joe, I'm not opposed to this. I think it's actually a pretty good idea. I just think that, and I love simple code changes, but this one might be too simple. I think we may need to expand on it and get more sections that will coordinate better with this to allow it. Again, I think it's and maybe we won't get it done in time, but I don't know. But I think that's just my opinion. I think we're missing a few things here. Based on project example, sure, this could work in your 4-story scenario, but I think we need to look beyond that to the building height and area tables and what can actually be done when you combine the allowances of 510-2. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
So a couple of questions. I've been trying to dig a little deeper and just educate myself on the horizontal separation and the history of it. You know, and Micah, I didn't know that was no longer in the ICC or in the Washington amendments, that the 300, I found a proposal back in the 2006 cycle that was put in, and the base code actually had multiple group A with occupant, or group A with a occupant load of less than 300. So maybe that was removed at some point since the 2006 cycle, but then added back into the Seattle code. I don't know if that's a true statement or not, but I'm kind of curious if anyone can play historian on that. And then the second one is, I don't know that I'm hearing that they're there's some understanding of the reason for this. If it doesn't move forward out of the tag, can this group provide a little better guidance on what the pathway could be if we were to explore this in the future, or if it should be explored at the model code level? I haven't heard that yet, what the concern is.
So we can definitely move, I guess if it doesn't move out of the tag, we should consult on what we would, if we would encourage like some development between now and the 2027 cycle. But if it doesn't move forward here today, if the tag has the will, we could seek some revisions to this petition.
Yeah, that's the other thing, is just give it, let table and let if someone was desired to put a little more history behind this and then express the concerns. A couple people have their hands up, maybe they're going to answer this question. Jay?
Yes, I just want to mention that, I think a good point of discussion here too is, why is E excluded from this group? It's in the same level of, if you look at the occupancy classifications, A, B, E, F, M, S, and U are all together. But when you go to this 510 chapter or section of the code, E has been excluded. So there is a reason why that was, not in that group. And it's a good, point to ponder on. That's all.
Yeah, thank you. Tim?
So to speak to what Shay just brought up, is this idea that, E was purposely excluded. I think sometimes things get in the code because people are looking at specific scenarios, and for whatever reason, they were able to get it in the code to meet their scenarios, but it does reduce the construction type, so therefore the life safety. I would be interested in, kind of understanding, that same nuance there, whether it's why they left E out, or why they, or what have you, or why you want to put it in. But my concerns would be, is E occupancy, obviously children, obviously I would think that the egress time is different. I would think that, you have situations where one person is trying to direct 30 children in some scenarios to get them out of buildings versus dumping them into or close to, an open parking garage. If there was provisions added to the proposal that talks about similar requirements to the 1-story or 6-story one exit provisions, that the exit enclosures could only serve the E occupancy and would directly discharge at grade or directly discharge to the public way, that would be a start to making me feel more comfortable with my limited understanding on why E was left out. But again, to put it in, I would want almost you as a proponent to tell me why it was left out and use some sort of history for that, and then tell me kind of how we're going to mitigate for that concern with this new proposal.
Yep, that makes sense, Tim. And maybe perhaps, an area of refuge would help with any. Just a thought.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, first of all, I can't speak to the background. I don't know the background. All I'm doing here is observing in this situation. But, with this discussion, one of the things unique to E that isn't found anywhere else is there are provisions in E in some of those situations where you have to have exits out of every classroom directly at grade. And that is one of those pieces, I think, that may have affected this originally. Again, I don't know if it has or not. I have no knowledge of that, but that is my observation on that piece. And then just to back up on the, when I mentioned, is it unique to Washington? Really, all I'm doing here is referencing in WAC 5104-020, number 4, in discussion of, rules for consideration of statewide amendments. Number 4 is the council will accept and consider compliant petitions for all other statewide amendments to the state building code if one or more of the following criteria are met. And then there's three pieces. There's the amendment is directed by the legislature. B, the amendment is necessary for code correlation, correction of errors, language clarification, or section update. Or C, the council determines that the amendment would serve a critical public interest and require immediate accelerated action. So if the council thought that this, was necessary to serve a critical public interest, great, doesn't have to be unique to Washington. But that's where my thoughts were coming from, is that section in WAC that kind of dictates kind of what we're supposed to be looking for in adoption of statewide amendments. But again, technically, I have no issue with this either way. So I kind of have no opinion as to whether we'd move it forward or not.
Okay. Well, Joe, what do you think? As proponent, is this something that you'd like to collect more information and ask the TAG to table, or is it something, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this one, there's any, fast track need for anything like this. I think part of the reason I submitted this was not trying to dig up the background about why E was left out in the first place. So it's hearing some more discussion there has been great. So if there, I guess, if anyone is willing to work with me a little bit more on this, maybe I don't know if probably there might not be time in this code development cycle, so maybe it's more of an effort looking toward the next, depending on how much work we can get done, and if anyone is willing to help me put what additional guardrails might make this a more feasible option.
Well, Joe, I would say that I don't think there's not time.
Okay.
I mean, and I say that obviously we want to move through these efficiently, but we also, want to raise the question, get feedback on what the concerns are, and then of course, give opportunity for more questioning or in public engagement. So really, it's a public process. So this is the chance here. Nothing's going to happen in the next 2-3 years if we don't do it now. So I wouldn't immediately give up on it. But Tim, go ahead.
I was going to say I'm happy to work with you moving forward, at least understand the history of where it came from, because like everybody on the tag, they mentioned the A group used to have 300. Maybe you could go back to the code change that switched that from the A having 300 and at least get some rationale on where this is coming from, and then use that as some evidence or some backing up or shoring up of your proposal. And maybe those other changes I mentioned wouldn't even be necessary at that point. So if that's available, then yeah, you could maybe come back with something pretty quickly. If this goes back to some Boca code that made it into the IBC way back when, that's going to be a lot more difficult and take a lot more time. And I'm not up for that within the next couple months.
Yeah, but I think to that point, Tim, this is valuable as the TAG public process to also document our conversation, so that if someone wanted to, further think about it in the ICC process or so forth, that we at least have something to document why this TAG was for or, against moving forward on this. Go ahead, Micah.
Yeah, I'm down at the Long Beach ICC code hearings right now with a big group from Wabo and Seattle, including Tim. He's just in a different hotel room. But I'd be happy we'll throw this out in front of the group as one of our group chats, even though we're dealing with a lot of national stuff for 2027. It's an interesting topic and get their feel on it. If we don't make something in time, Joe, I know Wabo would definitely be open to discussing this at our technical code development committee and looking at if there's a way to help develop it for a future code cycle as well. You got a pretty big stakeholder group there that would probably provide you a lot of good technical info. So thanks. Be happy to help.
Thank you. Yeah. Roger.
Can you hear me now too?
Yeah.
All right. My only request is whomever quoted the WAC, I was getting out of my car and logging onto my computer. I would love to have that WAC number. I always try to educate myself about those types of things.
That was me. It was WAC 51-04-020 and essentially paragraph number 4.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Roger, that's the rules for the consideration of the proposals.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, I guess we need to take action though. So what's the desire of the tag, to table this? And put it at the end of the line again?
Sure, I'll make a motion to table, and then hopefully, if we get a second and do this, Joe and I could work together on it.
Okay, thank you, Tim.
I'll second it. This is Paul.
Okay, that's Paul, thank you. Okay, any other discussion? Okay, the motion is to table 090, I think it is. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. It's tabled. Thank you, Joe and everyone for those comments.
And on that one, if I'm gonna send out an introductory handshake, it's Micah, Tim, Joe, and I feel like I'm missing one other who said that they'd be happy to work on that one.
I heard it was gonna get solved in Long Beach this week, so we'll just wait to hear back from those. Okay. Yeah, anyone else? All right, thank you for that. So then moving on, we're gonna move to agenda item 6, which is petition 114, please.
Joe, do you want me to send you out what I have drafted here as far as a more appropriate showing of the this amendment here? Or are you guys
Yeah.
gonna be making? Okay, I'll shoot this one out to you as well.
Hey, Dustin, while you're making amendments, it still has tag as the proponent on this one.
Yeah.
You might want to go ahead and switch that out.
That's a good call. And just to reinforce, I think Joe made the comment, 090 and the previous horizontal separation, those are two separate petitions.
Yes. All right, this one is from Eric Vandermeer. I believe he's online with us today, and he did also submit a revision to this one in response to conversation at a previous meeting, and I'd like to bring that one up. I don't have that right here in front of me right this second, so give me one moment.
Okay. Is Eric not with us today?
I think he is.
I'm online, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So Eric, if you want to take us off, I'll pull up the other proposal you sent and get it up here for everybody to see.
Yes, thank you. So this is similar to one of the proposals that was reviewed at last week's meeting, where I volunteered to do some additional research on the current NFPA 70 revisions. Most of these items are editorial changes, but then we did discuss kind of a slightly different path for how to refer to the NFPA 70 sections. So the first is a sectional reference from 909.11 to be the more specific section for stairwell pressurization, which would be, or stairway pressurization, which would be 909.20.6.2 in the 2024 code. If you scroll down in this proposal, I do have the various code sections referenced here, so we can take a look at those. But 909.11, as you see there at the bottom of the page, is the general reference for all smoke control systems. And when you go into 909.20, the smoke-proof enclosures, if you keep scrolling down, you'll see that 909.62 is the very specific section for standby power for the stairway system. So I think that's just an editorial correction. Again, this is a Washington State specific section that we're amending in the code. So I'm trying to get that aligned with the latest 2024 IBC language there. The second editorial change is just changing the word shaft, stairway shaft, to stairway enclosure to be, if you go back up to the code change language, just to be consistent with other sections of the code. And then, as we discussed last week, yeah, if we go all the way up to the latest language. Okay, so then in red here, we discussed removing the reference to the 2020 NEC and instead referring to NFPA 70. All other sections of the code that refer to NFPA 70 refer to it as NFPA 70, and then you go to the reference standards section of the code to find the applicable version of that, which would be the 2023 version. The 2023 NEC is adopted for both the 2021 Washington State Code as of now and is the reference standard in the 2024 IBC. So then I had a pretty minor revision before to, or actually as of last week, I worked with Richard Williams a bit offline. And do you have the PDF with the NFPA 70 analysis? So we can take a look at that before we dive into this, or I have it open, I think, if you want me to share my screen.
Thought I had that. Give me one moment. If you have it available, it might be a little faster than me grabbing it.
Okay, yeah, I have it open. If I can share my screen here, hold on a second. Okay, which screen is that? So as we talked last week, which of the appropriate NFPA sections should we be referencing for stairwell pressurization? So I went back and did an analysis here of the 2017, 2020, and 2023 sections of 701.12 sources of standby power for legally required standby power. There's been quite a few section changes to this section in the NEC in NFPA 70 over the last few years. As you can see, the first section used to be one section, and now they've broken up this into A, B. So some of these general requirements for the legal required standby power source are now specific subsections within that. So we definitely do need to update the section lettering in the 2024 code and also in our 2021 code that's currently in effect. The supply duration section is a new kind of section in the 2023 code. They've grabbed multiple sections from other areas of this section and made it a single section. As you see, battery storage was an A and was then C, and now is part of this C section now. Generator set was B, then it became D, now it's D, but they've moved some of these sections into here. So the generator set section has been modified slightly. Then you go into UPS. So uninterruptible power supplies was C, then it was E. Now they're calling that the stored energy power supply systems, which also incorporates the fuel cell section. Then you have the separate service section, which was D, F, and then still F, though there has been some editorial revisions as far as how that is presented. The connection ahead of the service disconnect main, the one that hasn't been allowed for the stairway pressurization systems per the Washington State language was E, then it became G, it's currently G. As I mentioned, fuel cells now doesn't have its own section, and then the microgrid system has been revised also. And then the unit equipment section was G, then it became J. Now that section doesn't exist at all. And the battery equipped emergency luminaire section wouldn't apply to stair pressurization, but that's a new section in the code. So that's a brief summary that we did to look at the lettering. As we discussed last week, what I'm recommending now is that we specifically state that you have to comply with sections 701.12, including A, B, and C, which are the general sections that are required. And then you have to comply with one or more of the following system types from NFPA 70 section 701.2, which would include generator set, the stored energy power supply systems, separate service, or microgrid systems. And I'm recommending we don't list the C, D, E, Fs and just list those specific systems types. And so if those section numbers change, we'll hopefully have a little bit more generic version of the code to help catch those. So those are my proposed revisions based on the discussion last week. And I'll hand it back over to folks for questions.
Thank you, Eric. Go ahead, Tim.
Echo that sentiment. Thank you for putting that together. That helps me out a ton because I did not have access to it, even though other people told me you can access NFPA for free. I haven't tried that yet. So, but looking into this, I like the way that this revised version states it. To me, what we're dealing with here is L&I is going to be the ones that adopt the rules in regards to electrical code. And if we can be less specific in the building code, allow them to adopt rules that govern generator set, stored energy power systems, all of these things, it'll help us not be conflicting, hopefully, in the future. So I think for that reason, I appreciate and like this change for the bottom portion here. I still have a little bit of trepidation with some of the other portions. You know, we have connect to stairway enclosure. I think we all know what that is. But then I know that the defined term in the building code they're using now is interior exit stairways. And that is defined. So we're going to change it now because we all knew what a stairway shaft was as well. It makes me curious if we shouldn't explore other options. Aside from that, I think it looks good.
And I guess, Dustin, I can give you back the screen if you want to.
So we're proposing to insert that text there to call it interior exit stairways enclosure.
I'm not even proposing that. I wanted to open it up for discussion because that is a defined term that we can work with, but I don't know if for other reasons they use this determination or this, you know, stairway enclosure thing. But if you go to chapter 2,
the words are here. I guess interior exit stairways and ramps, and then here.
I'll stole it back from you, Eric, just so you know.
Yeah, go ahead.
So is there language we want to discuss changing? So we had
Well, I just throw it out there to Eric. Was there a reason why we went with enclosure there, or was that just throwing it out there?
Yeah, the reason I went with enclosure there, let me find that back up. Hold on a second. Is because in 90920 it's called a smoke-proof enclosure, so that's why I used the word enclosure instead of shaft.
Okay, well, with that being the rationale, since in this provision we are talking about pressurized interior exit stairways, I think for definition purposes, I think I would propose that change to convert it to interior exit stairway versus stairway enclosure.
I mean, we could say the smoke-proof enclosure pressurization equipment. That might be more consistent because then it would include both the interior exit stairway and the ramp portion. So yeah, we could use the word smoke-proof enclosure in the second portion. And I
Yeah,
guess
we're
technically it would be smoke-proof enclosure ventilation systems, not pressurization equipment or something.
So, instead of interior exit stairway that you have highlighted there, Dustin, um, um, if we could highlight interior exit stairway, shaft enclosure, even though shafts and wiped out, and that was replaced with smoke-proof enclosure. I think that gets to both of our concerns so that we're kind of on the same page, I think. Are we ready to go back on that?
Yeah, there's no hyphen in it. Smoke-proof is one word in 90920. So.
Currently trying to see if smoke-proof enclosure is defined. I don't think it is. That's what I'm looking at.
It's italicized, so it must be defined in 90926.1. I'll go look, sorry. But yeah, it isn't italicized, and if you scroll down,
yeah,
to the code clips at the bottom of this, you got to go there. Yeah, so there it's shown as italicized.
It is defined, and it seems to fit that definition well. So it's defined as an exit stairway or ramp designed and constructed so that the movement of products of combustion produced by a fire occurring in any part of the building into the enclosure is limited. So I think I like that language.
So what's shown in highlight blue to replace the highlight yellow text?
That's correct.
Okay. This is all change.
While he's doing that, and for the record, that definition does actually include an exit stairway or ramp designed and constructed, yada yada. So it has all the correct language.
And should smoke-proof enclosure be underlined in this one?
Yes, as that's new language, correct? We underline anything that's new?
Correct. Okay. There more I need to do on this one, or are we in the position for motions?
Not sure it's perfect after rereading it, but I'd make a motion to accept what you have on the screen now with smoke-proof enclosure. Still seems to be the best way to go. And everything else that Eric had laid out for us previously.
there a seconder to that motion?
Mike Barth.
Right, so
I
the
could
motion,
second
but
it.
no second.
No,
Michael?
I could second it, but my hesitation for doing so initially was I missed last week's meeting, and therefore I missed any of the discussion on the Rich Williams proposal, and so I'm just kind of a little curious on that and what because I see in the minutes that kind of got put off. And Eric, you did mention that you had talked to Rich, so I'm just a little curious about that background, and I hate to waste people's time because I was the one that missed the meeting, but that was the only reason I hesitated.
Yeah, so my proposal was not reviewed last week. Rich's was. And then we worked together. I just decided to modify my proposal. The discussion, they're very similar. That the other proposal was about correcting the references, the A, B, C, D, E, F references. And mine has a couple additional changes, which include the 909.20.6.2 reference and the NFPA 70 language. And then the discussion last week was to make the list we refer to more generic so that we don't have to match these A, B, C, D things all the time. So
thank you.
Hey, Dustin, sorry about that. Thank you for covering when I stepped out. Okay, so, but I did hear there was a motion and a second, right? So now we can continue discussion, or is there anything else?
Eric, this is Andy Lianto.
Right.
I guess I haven't looked and compared the different options between the different versions of NFPA 70. Could you confirm that those 4 options that you've noted there were consistent with what the 2021 Washington State Building Code already includes?
Yeah, I can go. Were you online when I went through the different versions of the NFPA 70? I can walk back through that table. Hold on a second.
So maybe just to summarize, Andy, he did go over what those were. He also showed how it's expanded over time and included some additional requirements. But overall, it has all the original proposal or provisions, and if anything, it just expands on that.
Yeah, so this provision was originally adopted under the 2015 Washington State Building Code and referenced NFPA 70 2014. It's very similar to the NFPA 70 2017 version as far as the numbering goes. You know, the one major one that was excluded, if we paged through here, is the keep going. So generator set, so all these numbers have changed, but it's the one that hasn't been included was the connection ahead of the service disconnecting mains. So that one I, of course, left out again. I did not reference that one. So the separate service is allowed when approved by the code official, you know, but that one still has the language that it has to have approved by the code official if you go back 2 pages. And then I know there was a little discussion last week about microgrid systems and microgrid systems that are designed to meet all these requirements, and NFPA 70 I think should be allowed. Again, that was a new terminology that was introduced in the 2020 version of the NECC and 2020 version of NFPA 70. And that one was not referenced by the 2018 code, but likely I don't see any problem with adding that. A microgrid system essentially is going to have multiple components like generators or battery storage or other things to make up that microgrid system. And since it's acceptable in NFPA, I don't know why we wouldn't allow it. So
Yeah, thank you, Eric. So it looks like we're not adding or we're not deleting any of the options that were or that are currently indicated in the 2021 Washington State Building Code, and since that's the case, then I don't have any issue.
okay, well, I just came up with another issue that we might have to deal with. Can we go back to the language? So my change to 909.26.2 works for the smoke-proof enclosures. Go back up there, but does not work for elevator hoistway pressurization systems. I just realized. So, but I guess it does refer. Well, it's just a weird language. Why are we referring to both 909 and to 20.2.17? So yeah, maybe I gotta go work further on this and make sure we got the right referencing.
With that, I'll withdraw my motion. And I think we're just so close. I wish we could vote on it today. Dustin, is there a possibility that we could vote on this today and move it forward, and then he could bring forward any minor changes at that final hearing?
I mean, that is a possibility. I don't know if that's the most clean way to do it.
Okay.
But I mean, that is a possibility, yes.
The other option is like tabling it through the next proposal, and then maybe I can have the right references.
Go ahead, Roger.
Well, I have one item I want to discuss when we're done with this, if we can, but I would also, going back to the last code cycle, if the intent of this is accepted by most, but we're doing some minor tweaks, that can be accomplished, in my opinion, at the BFRW committee. You know, if the tag passes this, but there are some minor tweaks that we need to take care of, that information just gets passed along to the BRFW. We incorporated at the BRFW committee, and that updated motion goes on to the full state building code council. So there's a lot of work for us to do. I believe that we have that ability, and the definition of minor, you know, editorial tweaks is always going to be not a straight line, but so I'm not following along this too much, but I just was going to comment that if you're just making some minor changes, if the tag is okay with the proponent making some minor changes and passing it along, we do have that ability.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. And Eric, I mean, whatever, I think it's whatever you would like to do. You spent more time on this council than any of us, so. Michael, go ahead.
Michael, you're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. I was just going to point out that now I lost my train of thought because I missed my button. The sentence structure in that you know, in that sentence, it's kind of a complicated sentence anyway, but it's, you know, to be connected to smoke-proof enclosure pressurization equipment, elevators and lifts, comma, elevator hoistway pressurization equipment. So I think the Eric's concern on the smoke-proof enclosure, it may not be that much of a concern, because elevator hoistway pressurization equipment is actually listed separately in the sentence regardless. So whether that matters or not, I don't know. But from a, you know, sentence structure, that it just doesn't seem to be too difficult there. So I'd be supportive of you know, keeping moving forward if we could.
I mean, if we
Comma there.
In looking at it, it likely should, that section should just say Legally required power shall be provided in accordance with 2702. If you only refer to 2702, then 2702 provides all the references for the various items, that are listed in the next sentence, which would be the smoke-proof enclosures, the elevators and lifts. All those items are then covered there, I think. So
So do you want to strike this language?
and the 17, because the 17 is only for smoke control systems. And it lists elevators and lifts in the next section, right? So 20, so you get rid of the dot 17 also.
Yeah. The 909.20 though is a good reference point.
Yeah, so when you go to 2702 it's actually .2.17. What is 20? Is there even a 20? There isn't a 2702.17. That section doesn't even exist.
Details.
So if you go to 2702 2.17, that sends you to 909.20.6.2.
So does that need to be drafted in there? 2702.2.17?
No, I think you just say 2702 because that's the general. I don't know.
So I think this got a little complicated. Why don't I make a motion to table it and then we can work on it? Because I think we agree with the references being updated, and we agree that there's confusion in here already. You were changing it to enclosure. The only reason I stepped in is I hate seeing it go from a stairway exit to an enclosure to a shaft to just trying to come up with consistent language. So if we can generalize it, I'd be happy to work with you, and then we can just go back with that. Maybe we should pull Rich into that conversation too. So
yeah, I can work on this and bring it back. Sounds good. It's all Washington state language that's needs improvement.
Okay. So I think that seems like a good idea. Tim, that was a motion. Did I hear a second? To table?
I'll second. It's Mike.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Okay, any other discussion? Okay, the motion is to table. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, is that 141 is tabled?
114 revision 1 is tabled.
Thank you. Go ahead, Roger.
Yeah,
Thank
I wanted to bring something to everybody's attention related to WAC section 5104.020. And Dustin, if I could share my screen. I looked at it in the conversation that we just had. I don't believe the interpretation is quite correct. So let me know when you can see my screen.
It's up.
Can you see it?
Yes, sir.
So 51-04-020 says rules for consideration of proposed statewide amendments. One says that all petitions to statewide amendments have to comply to 51-04-025. 2 is for the council can accept and consider compliant petitions for emergency statewide amendments. So that's what, if it's an emergency. 3 is for accept and consider compliant petitions for statewide amendments that are submitted within the time periods of the council. So that's what we are currently undergoing. Section 4 that was commented on, that was referenced, is for that we can accept and consider compliant petition for all other statewide amendments. And that's where the A, B, C, and D come into play. We are not under item 4, we are under item 3, which in my reading of the WAC, it says that we have to conform to 5104.025. when I go there, state line amendments to the state building code shall conform to the purposes, objectives, and standards of RCW 1927, which I'll go to shortly. But in this case, to meet 5104-025, we have these 5 different requirements that allow us to make statewide amendments, and they include things like eliminating obsolete, conflicting, duplicate, or unnecessary regulations. Correct, errors and omissions is kind of the similar things. Clarifies the intent or application of the code. So this is a little bit broader description of things that we can change, and I don't know exactly specific to the type E on the podium that we were talking about, if that would be considered an unnecessary regulation. I'm not arguing one way or the other. All I'm doing is making sure we are understanding as a tag what we can and what we have the ability to do and what we've been directed to do. Then if you go to RCW 1927-020, it talks about the purpose of this chapter is to promote the health, safety, and welfare. This chapter is designed to effectuate the following purposes, objectives, and standards, and require minimum performance standards for construction materials. The one that I pointed to is eliminate restrictive, obsolete, conflicting, duplicate, and unnecessary regulations and requirements which could unnecessarily increase construction costs or retard the use of new materials. So I would, in the discussion about type occupancy E over a podium, if this tag felt like it was appropriate, I believe that there are ways that we could, under the RCW and the WAC, make amendments to the ICC, the model code. So I just wanted to be clear, Todd. This is something that we're dealing with in the other tags as well, is what do we have the power to do and what do we not have the power to do. So when we're talking about what we can make changes, I just wanted to point that out. And Todd, you're the chair. I'll call on Michael. I don't want to.
Oh, go ahead. No, it's a conversation. Thank you, Roger. Go ahead, Michael.
And I was just going to say, I agree completely with what Roger just said on all that. The only reason I brought it up initially was to say, that we are, when making these decisions, we do need to pay attention to these criteria. So,
yeah.
So thank you. And thank you, Roger, for digging deeper into that while we're
I agree. I think as a council member, it's like and that's we've had a lot of conversations at the council level about, particularly with recent laws that have passed, what can we and can't we do. So I'm trying to make sure I understand and bring that to everybody's attention. So that's all I've got, Todd.
Thank you, Roger. No, I do think it's very helpful. And I'd also put out, the comment that if this isn't the forum to have a public process, then I don't know what it is. And I think we get frozen a little bit on this council because of a lot of the litigation and so forth. But okay, if someone wants to challenge building schools, please bring it forward. So thank you for that. Okay, that's helpful. Okay, I think Micah, you're up with petition 0585.
I don't want to steal the thunder from Micah, but I think we should go back and approve the agenda in minutes if we can.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay. With that suggestion, we'll go back to agenda item 2, review and approve agenda. Can we hear a motion to approve, please?
So moved. This is Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Second, Lance.
Okay, thank you, Lance. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so approved. Dustin, do we have minutes for item 3?
Yes, we do. And just as I wanted to note that we had a request to move item number 14, 16, and 17 to the next meeting. The folks are tied up at the code hearings and won't be available to discuss those ones. So As we get to those ones, the plan was to skip over them.
Okay, I don't know if we need to take action. Anyone opposed to that? Okay. If we get to them and someone's opposed, then we can reconsider there.
Okay.
Okay, so can we hear a motion to review and approve the meeting minutes from September 26th, October 3rd, October 10th, October 14th? And while we're hearing that motion in second, we'll review them on screen.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from the last 3 meetings. This is Tim.
I think it's 4, Tim. I think
4 meetings. This is Tim.
okay. Thank you, Tim.
Second that.
That's Andy. Thank you. We'll continue skimming them, but does anyone know of any proposed edits or corrections? This is October 10th. We've gone through September 26th, October 3rd, October 10th. Okay. Thank you for that. So after reviewing all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so approved. Thank you for that, Dustin.
You're welcome.
Okay, now going back to agenda item 7 is petition 085, and Micah, you're welcome to discuss.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate you tabling or postponing some of the WABO proposals. There are a lot of folks down here in Long Beach. Tim and I are about the only ones that could get away from the hearings at this point, but Rich and others have been mentioned today are all down here in Long Beach working on the national code, so we don't have to bring as many code change proposals, I think. At least that's our goal, but maybe that's not the way it always goes. So this code change proposal came about based on the Chapter 12 changes that were made by the SBCC in the last year or so. Those Chapter 12 changes deal with energy storage systems in or on the ICC website. Chapter 12 of the Fire Code, Washington Fire Code, Section 1207.7.4 deals with fire-resistant rated separations in dedicated use and non-dedicated use buildings for ESS. Under those, they require a 2-hour separation, and it points to Section 707 of the IBC and Sections 711 of the IBC. Section 711 will be another proposal we're going to listen to after this one, but 707, pointer from the IFC to the IBC, when you go to the current IBC, there's nothing in there that tells you need to have a 2-hour separation for these areas that contain energy storage systems. So this is just in alignment with that section of the fire code. You can, if you follow the current 707 section, get a separation that would be less than that 2 hours in certain uses, they either in the non-dedicated use buildings for sure. So again, you could have a building where you would install these and you could end up with a 1-hour separation based on what's in the IBC if you're not reviewing in the IFC. So we wanted to align those. That's all this proposal does. I want to apologize. My reason statement below says the 2024 IFC. We are working with this at the national level as well. And that should say pretty much the 2021 Washington Fire Code under my reason statement. So no reason to edit unless you really want to, but I did want to point out that mistake. It's probably made in the other form as well. But that's all this does. Makes that minimum 2-hour fire resistance rated separation alignment with the IFC Chapter 12 that we've already adopted at the state. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Micah. Is there any discussion before we entertain potential motion? Go ahead, Tim.
Just to make sure I fully understand, when I look at this, you know, it's requiring a fire barrier separation, and you mentioned for rooftop energy storage systems. So traditionally, fire barrier, right, has to be supported by the same rated construction, but it seems like our hazard is just on the roof. So is it really just trying to limit where the separation occurs directly below the system, or are we trying to take it all the way back to the structure?
Great question. That has come up. This is not particularly specific to the roof, by the way. These can be pretty much housed anywhere, whether that's in a building, in a space in the building. Again, you can have a dedicated use building. So if you've got larger systems, but then you may have non-dedicated use buildings where it's a room in a building that has one of these systems, whether that's, you know, can be in a small R2 and have a room for ESS. But again, the intent, and that was the understanding from the intent of the fire folks as well, is not to have that supported construction be the same rating for these particular incidents. So it's a good question, but that is not the intent. And that's why the specific location and identification pushing you back to the fire code. Again, this states where the fire code or required by the fire code. So it's specific there. But that's a great question. And that's why it's written the way it is. Thanks, Tim. Hopefully that answers it.
Kind of. Because I think I do understand the intent. I just, you know, similar to when we have accessory use spaces, sometimes we'll actually specify whether or not that supporting construction does need to match or not match and the different circumstances therein. But if this is going to put us in alignment with the fire code, that's something that we could come back and modify later. So I think I'd still be in support of the proposal overall. I just think maybe there's some more work in the future.
So is what you're saying is I have a little bit of job security then? Awesome. Thanks, Tim. I do think that work occurring on this as well. But this is to capture, I know that in Washington, we've advanced some of those chapter 12 code changes into the 2021, and some of those aren't even coming into the 2027 for the national level. So there'll be some work in the future on this for sure.
Thank you, Tim. Go ahead, Roger.
Micah, do you know if this has been coordinated with Ken and the IFC tag? Are they expecting this to come through? I know there were some coordination things about these.
Ken knows all about this one, obviously, with us working together in Seattle. I'm not sure this necessarily has to go through the fire code. Again, it's already a fire code requirement, and this is building code chapter 7. Sure. If it needs to go through them, great. I think they're all on board. Ken's on board. He's like, yeah, submit this. We're putting it in. So he's supporting at the national level as well.
I don't know that it necessarily has to go through IBC or IFC tag, but it's just, I know that they are addressing the same issues and the same questions. So if Ken's aware of it, then I'm sure that it's being coordinated there.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, just a general question. So energy storage systems, we're talking about a certain type of batteries, or is that like lithium ion batteries? Is that what this is about? Or just any batteries?
Great question. It's pretty much any electrical energy storage systems are all kind of combined. There's PV storage systems, there's fuel cell power systems, various things, but they are talking about when you store that energy somewhere in a dedicated or non-dedicated space, you require these separations, and this is just coordinating with that in the fire code.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
I was just going to note too that I have run into this before, and it is required by IFC section 1207 that so putting it in the building code is a good pointer for that. It doesn't really change any requirements because it is a IFC requirement.
Okay, good comment. Thank you, Roger.
Yeah, Micah, I'm curious, just as you mentioned, the energy storage system. So this is for the IBC. Would this, or how would it apply to
batteries in a garage for solar in the IRC, single family residences. Is this going to push those to 2 hour? Tim's shaking his head no.
I'm not gonna get into that. Maybe others will answer that, and that's the never-ending question: is does the fire code actually apply to 1 and 2 family dwellings or their detached or attached structures? I'm not going to get into that debate on this one. Some say yes, some say no. So my answer would be, if your jurisdiction says yes, the fire code applies, then this would apply to those spaces based on size. Now, in the fire code chapter 12, a lot of this is going to be based on size of the system that you put in. So it's a depends answer. How's that, Roger?
That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
But since this is the IBC, it's kind of irrelevant, right? Because you'd be pointing from the IRC to IFC, not through the IBC anyway. So okay. Any other discussion? Does anyone want to put a motion on the table?
This is Tim, and I would recommend approval by the full council of this proposal, or move it to the full council.
I think you had it right the first time. You recommend approval by the council. Okay. It's the motion. Is there a second?
It's Mike, I'll second.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Okay, any other discussion on this one? Okay, the motion is to recommend approval by the council. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that's 085 is recommended for approval. Thank you. Micah 086, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, group, for approving the last one. Hopefully this one will go as smooth. Again, same concept in chapter 1207 of the fire code. The indication is that the separation for horizontal assemblies will be 2 hours in accordance with section 711. In the building code, if you go to 711, it's not in there. So again, we are aligning chapter 711 to verify that you're going to get that 2 hour separation per the fire code, or where required in the fire code when you install these systems. I'll stop there.
Okay. Can you explain a little more, please, just for those of us that aren't as familiar with this, about the horizontal piece of this versus what we just did?
Sure.
Sorry if that's a naive question. I just, if I'm wondering, maybe someone else is.
It's a great question. If you want me to answer it, there's others that could do it as well. But what you're looking at is just the different types of fire barriers. You're going to have a fire barrier, but then you're also going to have floor and roof assemblies. And so really with the fire barriers, I'm going to say you're looking at more at walls, where the horizontal assemblies, floor and roof assemblies are going to be those horizontal separations. So fire barriers are going to get you the walls. This section is going to get you the roof and floors, and they're both going to be 2 hour. And the fire code points to different sections for those, and that's what this does. This makes it clear and the appropriate section for the fire code. And I see Tim saying the answer's better.
Well, thank you. Go ahead, Tim.
He answered it beautifully, but I just have the same concerns that I mentioned on the last one, because it just doesn't go far enough, in my opinion. I'm going to vote to approve it when we get to that point, because it's what the fire code says now. There's nothing more we can do until we coordinate with the fire tag in the future. This isn't a new provision that's going into the IFC. This is an already there. So we need to have something in the IBC as that available pointer for maybe a plan reviewer that's not reviewing for the IFC to make sure this doesn't get missed. But I hope code officials out there understand the intent is to protect the rest of the building from this hazard, and therefore could, exempt some of the supporting structure below if they had it, say, enclosed in a full enclosure of 2 hours. from the rest of the building. So I hope other building officials would see it that way. But until it's in code, which I think that's where the more work needs to take place with this, I think there could still be some interpretations happening out there that differ.
So Tim, if I restate what I think you're saying, we live in a 3D world and the code thing makes us think about these two things separately. That's what's, so my question wasn't so naive that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. But the building code is not the place to do that, you're saying?
It's a combination. It has to happen in the fire code and the building code in order for it to go into effect. If we just put it here, then you're going to have fire code officials that say that's not the intent and vice versa. So right now we're coordinating them to keep them the same, which is going to be the best we can do. I just hope in the future there's some coordination there to kind of clearly state what the intent of this proposal was all about and why it's in there to begin with.
So unless I'm opening up a can of worms, why can't we address both problems right now in the IFC and the IBC this cycle?
I'll throw my hand up on that. I'm not sure if we have identified all the issues. Again, this technology is moving rapidly. The codes at the national level are not keeping up at all. The proposals at the state level took a lot of time to pull a lot of advanced information in from future code cycles and code language to try to capture the updated technology. But again, and some of the items were overlooked in the building code, especially for jurisdictions where you'll have different groups enforcing different codes. In other words, in Seattle, we're not necessarily looking at the fire code. The fire folks are. We're looking at the building code. But if they say, hey, you need a 2-hour separation on this, if I go to the building code today, that wouldn't tell me I need a 2-hour separation for those energy storage systems. So it's just in alignment with where we stand today. And yes, there'll be a lot more language moving forward, probably more coordination across the codes. But again, it's like Tim said, we're doing the best with where we stand today. I just don't think there's enough time, Todd, to kind of answer your question right now to further advance items in the fire code, because it is very new. If you remember, that was almost an off-cycle rule last go round. It came in pretty late. So timing, I think, is part of that. Thanks.
Okay. I'll believe you. Okay. There is a motion and a second on the table. If there's no other is that correct?
I don't think there's a motion, but I'll make a motion to
okay, thank you, Tim.
recommend approval to full council.
Okay, thank you.
I can second that, it's Michael.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, now any other discussion? Okay, the motion is to recommend approval of 086. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, 086 is recommended for approval. Thank you. Thank you, Micah. So with that, how are we doing? Do we need a break, or do you we're halfway in our time slot?
I wouldn't mind a break, but we've also lost some people. I think I've been trying to do a roll call based on the participants list, and we may be right there at the border. If we lost one seat, we were lack of quorum at the moment. So maybe a break and a roll call when we get back would be best to make sure we have the quorum still.
Are we in danger on the last two that we couldn't take action?
I think we're in danger on the last one for sure. I've been trying to do it, but with people raising their hands and stuff, the names move around on the list, and it's
Okay.
hard to make the count.
Well, let's just take a break and then come back, regroup, and if we don't have quorum, we'll put 086 on hold if we don't have the quorum. Okay, let's what is it? 2:34, what, 10 minutes?
Sure.
2:45, make it easy.
Yep.
Okay, 2:45, thank you. Can we start the recording? Thank you. Okay, with that, let's just reestablish roll and then decide if we want to just retake that vote if we have quorum. Unless maybe we don't have Dustin back yet.
I'm here. I was just muted and everything, so I was doing roll call for myself. All right, so just doing a roll call real quick. Todd Bayrether,
Here.
Roger Haringa,
Here.
Joe Mayo,
Here.
Che Fortaleza. Not seeing them. Tim Woodard.
Here.
Steve Belzak. I see him on here still. I'll leave him as marked. He's an alternate for Tim Woodard. Lance Dahl.
Here.
Thank you. I want to skip the folks that were absent at the original. I didn't see them on. Michael Barth,
I'm here.
Paul Clark,
Here.
Andy Leanto.
Here.
All right, we still have a quorum of 8.
Okay. So I think we're fine then, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, with that, we'll go on to agenda item 9. Is that right? 115?
Yes, sir. This is 115 by Eric Vanderman.
Okay, Eric. Are you still with us, Eric?
I am, yes.
All right, floor is yours. Thanks.
So yeah, before we get into the kind of the code text, a little bit of background here. So the 2015 Building Code and Mechanical Code, IBC, IMC, started introducing provisions that distinguish between static fire dampers and ceiling radiation dampers and dynamic fire dampers and ceiling radiation dampers. In the 2021 version, they introduced a few additional language sections about the ceiling radiation dampers. And essentially, these dampers, if you're going to use a static damper, they have to be in a static system, meaning that you have to shut down the HVAC fan automatically. And that is clear in the section shown here for static dampers. The code is completely silent on an acceptable means of acceptable shutdown for these systems. And I guess before we go deep into this, I did want to bring up the interpretation that the State Building Code Council issued and talk briefly about that. Is it okay if I share my screen again as I have that document pulled up? Just making sure everybody knows about this interpretation as background information. So code proposals were due on Thursday, 9/19. The Building Code Council met on the 20th, the day after proposals were due, and did render some opinions on some questions that are on this topic. So obviously, when I submitted this code proposal, I wasn't privy to the response that happened the next day. So that may warrant some revisions to the language. But essentially, so the council did say that that the systems have to be made static even for small, like 100 CFM energy recovery ventilators. So a typical application of these static ceiling radiation dampers happens in our wood frame multifamily buildings. We're looking for cost-effective housing in the state of Washington. And we have a very restrictive energy code. And, a lot of folks want to run ductwork in the floor ceiling assemblies to avoid in the rated floor ceiling assemblies to avoid soffits and lowering ceilings and such. So we're getting a lot of these systems happening. So that the council did say that even in a small, like 100 CFM system, you would have to shut down that ERV. The council acknowledged that the code is silent on acceptable means of shutdown for small systems. And also, they did render the opinion, and we can look at these in more detail, that a duct heat detector or a heat duct detector limit switch would be an acceptable means of shutdown. So the first question that was looked at by the council was in regards to, yeah, do you have to shut down? And the answer was yes. The code is silent on how to shut down the ERV, whether it is on the detection of smoke, fire, or heat. And so, again, the code is silent on that. There is no clarity. And then the second question was asked, would it be acceptable to use this heat detector duct limit switch in the return of an ERV? And that was said to be an acceptable means. They did not render an opinion on what that device, that limit switch should be set to, that would be deferred to the AHJ. And so with that, we can go back and look at the code language that I proposed. The code language, is an attempt to provide clarity to code officials throughout the state of Washington as to what would be acceptable means of shutdown for these systems, automatic shutdown. These provisions were based on other shutdowns of HVAC systems as far as the language that's proposed. And so this is all new code language that you're looking at here for these static dampers. And I guess before we go into these in detail, so the two types of dampers, the static ceiling radiation dampers and the dynamic dampers. So some of the provisions that are showing up in the code are coming from the dynamic ceiling manufacturers. The static dampers are much more readily available. There's multiple manufacturers that make those. And these dampers are very specific around the UL listings. Dynamic dampers, there's only one or two manufacturers of the dynamic dampers. And so there's definitely a movement to put code provisions in for the couple of manufacturers that are making these dampers. And again, they're very specific to not only how they're installed, but the actual UL testings or ASTM testings assemblies. And so these provisions are intended to apply to all different sizes of systems. With the case that the State Building Code Council looked at for the small ERVs, where we have very small ducts on the order of 4 to 6 inch duct size. Some of the typical means of shutdown, like smoke detection and others, are not available because there aren't UL listed duct smoke detectors for some of these really small ducts and such. But these means, so the various items I have listed here are different means of detection, again, that are based on kind of IMC provisions. So maybe I'll just pause there and then we can walk through, see if there's any questions, I guess, on the background, what's going on, and then we can walk through this. And I guess one more correction before I do that, Dustin. So the section I referenced there, the 60723, that's actually the IMC section. And that should really say 71723 for the building code. So this is a provision that's both in the building code and in the mechanical code. So I guess, is there any questions on kind of the preface before we get into the code language?
So this is Tim. I would just want to throw out to start with is why we would need to make these changes in both locations. Meaning, if it's a static damper and that's defined within the mechanical code, it seems like the appropriate place. So having it here too is not saying it's totally wrong. I'm just curious because I'm already struggling with some of what I'm reading through here, not feeling like I have enough technical background to make the call, and would want to defer to some more mechanically specific.
Yeah, so the section that's listed here, the static damper section, is both in the mechanical code and in the building code. In the mechanical code, it lists that this is under the building fire tag. So I propose this as an IBC proposal. If we only want this in the mechanical code, or if the committee, the tag thinks that this should be deferred to the mechanical ventilation plumbing tag instead, totally happy to switch it over there and go talk to those folks. So okay, so the language I'm adding here, so the HVAC system shall be automatically shut down in the event of a fire by one of the following operations. So one acceptable means would be duct smoke detection. Of course, you'd have to have a duct size that you can install a listed smoke detector. And so this language mirrors language from the mechanical code on those appropriate means and the listings for those detectors to comply with the UL 268A provisions. And they have to be installed per the mechanical code section. Area smoke detection is also an applicable system. We've talked about this with some code officials, and on a multi-family building where you have these really small energy recovery ventilators, if you had a 400 apartment unit, you'd have 400 ERVs, each dedicated to one of those units. It's probably not something you'd use, but you would have to use an area smoke detector that's then connected to a fire alarm system to do that. So that's a pretty elaborate means of shutdown. But if you had a central system, this might be an acceptable means of a shutdown. So it'll vary based on your unit size. Then I had a dwelling unit area smoke detection. If you have a system that only serves a single dwelling unit, then you could use area smoke detection within that area. You would still have to use a fire alarm system to shut that down. What I've heard is that there are no area smoke detectors that are UL rated to shut down HVAC equipment. So you can't make this kind of a simple system where an area smoke detector is directly like hardwired to this small ERV. So you'd have to go back through your central fire alarm system to do this, is what I'm stating in item 3. Item 4 is the duct heat detection option. So when you look online and research about this topic, this is the common methodology to use a very simple heat detector instead of something that's more complex like a smoke detector and requires higher maintenance. And so I did use similar language here in item 4. So this is consistent with the State Building Code Council determination that detection of heat would be an acceptable means of shutdown for the ceiling radiation damper. And that was based on, these are not fire smoke dampers, they are ceiling radiation dampers that have fusible links in them, and by melting those fusible links with heat is how they are activated. And so this does provide code language for these devices, which are fairly simple and have less maintenance and can install in very small ducts. And I did propose a temperature similar to a fire smoke damper. So kind of a temperature range that's acceptable for that duct heat detection device. And then I left to catch all other automatic control means approved by the code officials. So that's what I'm presenting so that we have some enforceable code language. Again, this is common construction in Washington, and we're really needing to allow not every code official to make a decision on what's acceptable, but have some code language that code officials can rely on here. Thank you.
So Eric, to Tim's question there, do you have a preference? Do you feel it should be referenced and then most of this technical information in the mechanical code?
Since these sections are mirrored, yeah, I think this would also get mirrored into the mechanical code, and be in both places.
Well, your preference is it's in both places.
Yeah.
Okay. Michael?
I would echo that. And I was going to comment before that to Tim's question, both of these, both the 717 and the 607 IMC, they're identical in the codes. So to prevent those correlation problems in the future, it really would be best to put them both in there. As for the technical pieces here, I like having this additional options. And one of the comments Eric had made was you take a 400 unit apartment building, well, they still always have the option of that softened down direct exit, which doesn't penetrate a fire resistive assembly. So in those cases, they wouldn't require the fire dampers or radiation dampers anyway. So, you know, from a cost aspect, they still always have those options. The only, you know, time you need the dampers are when you're actually penetrating that fire resistive assembly, and all the more reason that we want it to be as protected as possible. So yes, I'm in support of this.
Thank you, Michael.
Steve here, just a brief question for Eric. Did I hear you correctly? Did you say that currently we don't have these devices manufactured that meet these requirements? Or did I misunderstand you?
No, well, are you talking about the ceiling radiation dampers or the shutdown devices?
The shutdown devices.
Well, like I said, things like duct smoke detectors are UL listed for certain duct sizes. So maybe if you have a 12-inch round duct, that would be acceptable. But if you have a 6-inch duct, that are not detectors for really small ducts, that needs a certain duct velocity and size. As far as the area smoke detectors, my understanding is there's not an area smoke detector that is UL listed to directly control the shutdown of an HVAC system. And so that signal from that area smoke detector has to go back to your central fire alarm system. And then that fire alarm system has to shut down that HVAC device. And so that might not be the best means, of shutdown. That's why, item 4 is pretty specific about that it has to be a listed system, and it has to be connected to a fire alarm system to do that. So mirroring other language in the fire code and mechanical code sections for those shutdowns.
Thank you.
Steve. Roger.
I'm just going to make a comment that the technical aspect of this is above my head, but the suggestion or the idea that the same wording get put in both the the mechanical code and the building code, knowing that one of the challenges we have is making sure that our codes are correlated. Down the road, you may have a mechanical code tag say, well, we should change this item number 1 or number 2 or whatever. And I could see that change not necessarily getting reflected in the IBC language. And now all of a sudden we have the two things that are not, don't align. So I would just, my first take would be to not put the same language in both codes, figure out which one it's most appropriate in and put it in one, just to avoid that future challenge. But
so just so you know, most of this section in the building code is also mirrored. We're not just talking about this, we're talking about pages of code is mirrored in the code here. It's in both places.
Then we should have a code proposal to change that whole thing. Okay, thanks, Eric.
Yeah.
I'd add on that too, that in the mechanical code, it has the BF marking that indicates that it's essentially controlled by the building code. So, and then just repeat it in the mechanical code. Sorry, Tim, didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
That's it.
no problem.
Thank you, Michael.
I think my mind's wrapping its head around this more. And Eric, I appreciate you kind of presenting these, and it's less technical than I was initially looking at. All these ULs, referenced and things like that, to not really think that this tag might not be the best to be the one to determine if all those are the correct references. It kind of feels to me like what you're trying to do is define what a static system is. But instead, we're putting those requirements under static dampers. Does that make sense? I mean, shouldn't we just have what a definition of a static system is, and that it does shut down the units?
Yeah, this is the statement. So there's other sections about the UL requirements for static dampers. I guess we could look at the code if I pull up the sections. So there's, let's see, what section would we look at? Let me just share my screen, I guess, and let's just, oops, I can't share it. So let's see here. Try to share again now. Let's. Okay, so if we start in 717, so we have ducts and transfer openings. Okay, so this is a statement that are statically shut down. And you have damper testing, which talks about fire dampers comply with UL 555, and then ceiling radiation dampers comply with, this section. Then it talks about the damper ratings. And then you go to the very end of 717. Well, I guess there's another section here about ceiling radiation damper activation. So that's temperatures for the actual ceiling radiation damper actuation. So we might want to look at that temperature, I guess, versus the one I proposed. We might want to use 160, I guess. So the new provisions that were added into the 2021 code is really this section in 717.6.2 membrane penetrations. So again, these penetrations are typically in the bottom surface, the ceiling surface of a rated floor ceiling assembly. And so they have this whole section about you're penetrated, you can penetrate if you have a shaft enclosure. I guess, does everybody know what the difference between a through penetration and membrane penetration? Through penetration is both top and bottom membranes of a horizontal assembly. A membrane penetration would be just the bottom or top membrane. And so they have these listing requirements. And so these new provisions were, so they have provisions now for how do I explain it? So they have, I guess this is the new section here. So they have the dynamic systems. Again, there's one or two manufacturers that make these dynamic dampers. And then what was added in the 2021 code was the static dampers. So they actually have provisions for static ceiling radiation shall be provided with systems that are not designed to operate during a fire. So, and then there's exceptions to that essentially in the code. So essentially they have provisions now that are allowed where you can have a static damper that is in a system that's not rendered to be static potentially. So it's very confusing language that they've added about this. When you read these proposals, I'm not proposing to touch any of this language. I'm just proposing to provide this provide acceptable means for how you do the automatic shutdown is what I want to get into the code. And I'm not sure if that answered your question, Tim, but there's just a lot of change that's happened in the system. I mean, a lot of folks aren't enforcing these, there's very loose enforcement in some jurisdictions about these dampers, whether they meet the actual UL listings. I think it's kind of gone under the radar that there is this distinction between static and dynamic dampers. And so, I think, yeah, there's definitely some training to happen here. So. And I don't know if like this device actually exists, a static damper that has a smoke detector attached to it. It sounds like a fire smoke damper to me, not a ceiling radiation damper, right?
Right, because the whole reason we use those is we don't need to connect electrical and back to the system and everything else. So once you put a smoke detector in it, then you're going to have to connect it to some form of power. So yeah.
But yeah, if you go read this code proposal from the 2021 code, this stuff was introduced by the dynamic damper people, not by the static damper people. So.
Almost to make it more difficult. I see.
Yeah. So
if we want to go back to the proposal and look at those items again, could I just ask that, when we defer something to a different tag, there's part of me that thinks, deferring this to the mechanical tag, I'm not sure kind of how that process works. Will it come back to us after they look at it, since it is a building fire provision within Chapter 7? Maybe that's a question for Dustin.
So you're wanting to refer this to the different tags and what the process like that looks like?
Not necessarily. I was just curious if we wanted to get their take on if they believe these 4 items are good 4 items to essentially automatically shut down heating appliances or heating or HRVs, ERVs in the event of a fire, that we could get their take on it before we're making action kind of as a building code.
Or maybe, I agree, maybe and especially since we're structured in a way that they're going to pass to different standing committees. Eric, is part of the strategy here that it goes to the building code first, because that would govern over any conflict, or is that not really part of the strategy? It needs to go to both anyway.
Well, yeah, I submitted this under the building code because it was covered under the building fire tag, or committee at the ICC level.
Oh, I see.
That's why I decided to submit it on this side. In the past, I was on the council for 10 years. Yeah, in the past there was code, tags did refer proposals to other tags for opinions on language before they approve them. I'd say that there has been precedence for doing that. So yeah, you could, I think the more direct motion that you pass gives them specific, marching orders onto what you want them to review it for. And that's definitely happened in the past. So.
Makes sense. Michael, do you have a comment on that?
It gets back to kind of some of those correlation issues, but even at the ICC level, because the BF is indicated in the mechanical code, this would be put to the building committee, not the mechanical committee. And then, of course, I've been around long enough to know that Eric Vandermeer and I worked together on the mechanical code tag also. So I don't know, Eric, if you're still doing all of that, because I have not paid attention to the mechanical code. But for Tim's concern, Eric, it kind of has been very very influential and involved in the mechanical code tag as well. So I'd see it more of, this is a building issue because the code puts it as a building issue. And then, I appreciate that, this would be a correlation that the mechanical code tag should look at it as well, just in confirmation and, to seek concurrence.
Yeah. I think it makes the most sense. I appreciate that background there. That's what I was looking for. So I think we can take ownership of it, but then if we move it forward for recommendation, just ask as a courtesy that we do some correlation and also get the opinion of the mechanical tag. Okay.
And no, I'm not on the mechanical tag, but yes, I had a bunch of code proposals, and one of my coworkers is on the State Building Code Council and chairs the mechanical code tag. So.
For those of you that don't know the inside joke here, no one, the council wouldn't bring somebody else in, so Eric could never retire. They have a state law now that doesn't allow someone to stay on the tag for 3 extra years.
And some of us are old enough to know who was involved 20 years ago.
So, all right. Well, thank you all for bringing this forward. Okay, that helps me at least. Is there anyone want to make a motion for a recommendation for approval with help me form that.
I was gonna maybe suggest recommend this to the mechanical tag before making a final recommendation for adoption to the council here. So there's room to take this to the mechanical tag. I'd have to look and see when their next meeting is. There's an energy code one happening this week, but I'm not sure if there's more scheduled out for mechanical at the moment. But we could take it to them, have them review it, make any suggestions for these items here, and then bring it back as part of our final, maybe make a preliminary recommendation for adoption with potential input from the mechanical tag.
And I think that's fine, Dustin. I was just trying to imply that to the best of our ability, we recommend approval but are seeking additional, consideration.
That sounds good. I mean, it's going to come back hopefully after the mechanical tag for our one more final review so we can digest it.
As long as that's understood. So we're just not passing it. We've considered it, believe we should recommend it for approval, and want additional consideration and correlation.
Yeah, with that said,
go ahead.
I'm looking at the proposal and I'm rereading it as we go here, and all of these are fairly standard ways that we've used in other instances to control HVAC systems. So, I mean, it totally makes sense to me. It feels like it's something I definitely would want them to look at, though. So I guess my motion would be to recommend that the mechanical code take a look at this with approval, or with at least a general understanding that everything looks good from the building code stance, but just a double check by the mechanical code tag.
That was a long motion, but I understand and agree. Is there a second?
Second, Steve here.
Steve, thank you, Steve. Okay, any other discussion? Okay. The motion is to refer to the mechanical tag. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. That motion is approved. Is that clear enough, Dustin and Rosanna?
Yeah. So I'll reach out to Krista and the chair of the mechanical tag and let them know that we got one that we want them to look at. And I'll probably relabel this as well, we're not making a proposal that this gets put into the mechanical tag or into the mechanical code. I'm sorry. We just want some input. So, but I'll let them know there's one coming.
Okay. That seems like a good solution. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just said thank you for.
Oh, okay. All right. Item 10 is petition 091. I don't think Ken's with us, is he?
He is not, but we have covered this one at the fire tag. Let me just pull up what their recommendations were here.
And is Ken as the proponent, is he okay if we discuss this, or does?
I think that there's some issue here. They referred it back to Ken for some more modifications, so I've got a revision on it for the fire tag, and then there's expected further revisions on it coming from the fire tag. I think it would probably be best if we hold off for that group to finalize what their recommendation is before we hear this one.
Okay, can we maybe just at least skim it here as a group and
Yes.
in case there's any feedback to the fire tag to. Does anyone want to speak to it, or Dustin, if you want to?
Yeah, so Ken's been pointing out, so when the 1 and 2 family dwellings or townhouses fall out of the scoping of the International Residential Code, when it's 4 stories, it's then R3 and underneath the International Building Code. The 1 or 2 family dwelling or townhouse should be allowed to be built to 4 stories or 60 feet in height without having to change the automatic fire sprinkler system from NFPA 13D to a 13R, which is required per the tables in 503 of the IBC. A 13D system does not have a height or story restriction, and this is based on a type of hazard being protected. Now reading that, remembering back to the IFC tag where we discussed this one, some of the points of contention is why is it necessarily the number 4 required there, and there were some issues with proving of the system brought up and the head pressures required in there. I'd have to go back to my specific notes on that meeting to really speak in earnest on this one, but since this one's being kind of workshop some more, that's what I have to bring for you. You know, Ken and the folks discussing this, they were speaking above my experience level with sprinkler systems, and I'm not super well versed in that. Micah.
Thanks, Dustin. Pretty good explanation. I've been working with Ken on this one as well. There will be some changes, significant changes. First off, meeting with Ken, a 4-story townhouse is not a group R3. It's a group R2. Ken is aware of that change. So there would be some modifications where they would specifically allow a group R2 townhouse out of the IBC to be use a 13D system with some parameters that Ken is going to be bringing forward. In addition to that, there'll be some modifications to the tables where it talks about height and stories and what sprinklers can be used in specific height and stories, which would modify those 2 tables. But again, there'll be some barriers kind of put around this and more specific information on the 1 and 2 family R3, and maybe some more robust prohibitions on what can be within those R3 units. In other words, you could have a care facility in a single family, and their intent is not to allow a care facility in an R3 to use a 13D system. That would be a more robust 13R system. So again, it's going to be very specific, and I think they're going to put some additional barriers around this. So anticipate this coming back to us, but it'll be significantly different from where it is. I wouldn't say significantly, but it'll be different from where it is today. But thanks for the explanation, Dustin. And I would suggest tabling it as well.
Okay, any other questions before we entertain a motion to table? Thank you both for explaining that. Okay, with that, can we hear a motion to table?
This is Tim. I would make the motion to table this.
Thank you. A second?
I'll second. This is Paul.
Thank you, Paul. Any other discussion? The motion is to table 091. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, with that, 091 is tabled. Thank you. Agenda item 11 is petition 074. Do we have our proponent, Mr. David Mao, here?
I don't believe so. So this one, another one in the chapter 9, while I'm familiar with reading it, I'm not the expert on this chapter in the fire code. But it looks like they are just trying to do some correlation work with what's happening in the fire code across the building code and the mechanical code. So this one's here before us today. Let me see what we've got on here as a result of the fire tag meeting on this one. On 074, this one is recommended for adoption as drafted by the fire code.
Okay.
So you say recommended for adoption as drafted by the fire code. Is that different? Was it amended in the fire code at all?
Oh, no, I guess as presented to you here now is the same one that was recommended for adoption in the fire code. So it's to provide a provisional or additional options for survivability protection of smoke control system circuits. I believe that they're looking for some redundancy in the systems. As it stands right now, they can have a single system operating these I'd have to get in there and read, but I believe this is for smoke control systems. Yeah, these are for smoke control and pressurization systems. This is intended to bring in redundancy so that if one system fails, all systems don't fail if there's multiple shafts and things like that. And the section in IFC and the IBC are the same number, so that's why they're grouped there like that.
Michael?
I can speak briefly to it. I'm certainly not an expert in it, but I have run into this in several projects where essentially the fire marshal was having difficulty getting that wiring protected, because it's one of those where the NFPA 70 requires the protection and the building code is kind of silent on it. And so when you have shafts, they can, protected shafts, they can run the wiring in those protected shafts. But then, like say in a pedestal building, when you're running horizontal, over to the fire control room or something, that's been, outside of shafts, outside of horizontal protection. So I believe what they're trying to get here is essentially to get it in, to where it's seen and obvious that that wiring does need to be protected by some means. So, and current code is kind of silent on that, or let's just say ambiguous. So.
Thank you, Michael. Andy?
So I do happen to have some experience with these requirements here. So options 2, 3, 4, and 5, they're talking about mostly about the rating of the cable. The original language in the IBC IFC section 909.12.2, they're talking only about the protection by the continuous raceways as required by NFPA or as defined by NFPA 70, but it does not talk about the requirements for the rating. I believe what the intent in here was to add options 2, 3, 4, and 5 as an additional option in lieu of providing continuous raceways only, the non-rated continuous raceway for NFPA 70. I do not have any significant opposition to this option, but those are typically the rating for the cables for smoke control systems, in particular when we're talking about stair or elevator pressurization systems. They're typically addressed in other sections in 909. If we're talking about the stair pressurization systems, the requirements for the rating of the cables are already addressed in 909.20.6.1. But this section for 909.12.2 is still applicable because it requires the continuous raceways. I'm not sure just by reading this, if we're providing option 2, 3, 4, and 5, whether that would lessen the requirement, because if you're already providing the 2-hour rating, i.e. you're running your cables inside the stairwell, if we follow this amendment, that would mean that we don't need to provide the continuous raceways because we're already providing a 2-hour rating to the cable. I'm just I'm not sure if I would approve or need to think about this more.
Steve here, I just have a question on number 3. It says electrical circuit system shall have a fire rating of not less than 1 hour period, and then electrical circuit protective systems. That doesn't make sense to me. Was there a typo or something there?
That's how it should be. The next line was supposed to be the continuation of that sentence.
See, thank you.
Again, I'm hearing this is Tim. I'm hearing what Andy's saying, and it's making me think we should be very careful about accepting options 2, 3, 4, and 5. My immediate concern goes, do I see a lot of 1 hour? But anytime we're 4 stories or more, we're going to have 2-hour protection of the shaft typically. So why wouldn't we be matching what the exit enclosure already is, or the interior exit stair already is, versus just allowing 1 hour everywhere. So I would like to see the proponent maybe speak to this more, and yeah, if that could be done, or someone else could shed some more light on why these are equivalent to a fully enclosed continuous raceway, then I think I would be willing to maybe take action.
Yeah, and Steve here again. Maybe I'm not missing something here, but to me, if you talk about requiring it within a continuous raceway, we all understand what that is and what it looks like. The other options seem like it'd be difficult to clarify or to verify. To me, there's so many potential, ways to go about it. It just seems like it'd be kind of difficult versus just having the way it is now. But I don't know if anyone else has anything to say about that, but that's just my thought.
Well, Micah, you have your hand up, and then the proponent has joined us, so welcome, David. But Micah, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks. I definitely want to hear from the proponent, but I guess my first question is, are you eliminating the requirements of 909.20.6.1 of the 2024 IBC, which has a lot of this information for your ventilation systems, wiring? And it seems like you're bringing some of that over, so I'm not sure if you're replacing or relocating some of what's there, but I'll let David speak and then I'll probably have more questions, but a lot of questions on this one. Thanks.
Hi guys, sorry, I just got in from another meeting I had to jump over. So the background of this is right now when fire alarm systems, the 909.12.2 says all wiring regardless of voltage shall be run in a continuous raceway. When you have a fire alarm system that would be installed regardless of the pressurization system, if it's a full coverage jurisdiction like in King County or Tequila or Puyallup, where every single smoke detector in the fire alarm system isn't there for pressurization, it's there for fire alarm detection. Well, that continuous raceway basically with the AHJs encompasses everything. They've kind of pushed back and said, well, you have to deal with the electrical inspectors on it. Electrical inspectors aren't looking at IBC or IMC or IFC 909.12.2 looking for it. So this is specifically just for the wiring that is not related directly to the pressurization system, because 90920 already covers that for ventilation. You're required to have 2-hour protection for anything that's part of the ventilation system. This is more on the outlier, like detection, water flow switches, pull stations, stuff that is not part of the smoke control system, where it becomes really costly to basically run a 1/2-inch raceway through a wood structure to get to smoke detectors that might be part of for a fire smoke damper. That's not part of the smoke control system. And this language is directly out of the 2027 ICC Council's proposal, which is like F139-24. And their reasoning was they wanted to have the wiring that's part of a fire alarm system that is part of not part of the control, not specifically part of the ventilation control, to have the same protection like a fire pump would. You know, the options to basically get around that, where we're still protecting it, but we have options to basically ensure that those circuits are being protected. Anything specifically related to the fans has to be 2-hour protected by other parts of the code. This is basically just saying that it's giving a little more option, a little more flexibility on, as long as the wiring is protected 1 hour, if it's not part of the actual smoke control system, if the system is isolated where it's designed properly, where the AHJs can see that, the engineers can pick up on that and see that it's engineered properly, that if there's a failure, if a smoke detector goes off in the part of the building, it's done its job. It doesn't need to survive 2 hours. Fans need to survive 2 hours, and they've actually started doing their work. It can do on, and this was voted on by the 2027 for the 27 ICC Council 13-1. It's basically just to provide options for the wiring onto a fire alarm system for detection and control, but not specifically for the ventilation, because other codes adopt that. NEC doesn't have any part of it that talks about fire alarm that is not associated with a pressurization system. They just say emergency circuits, emergency systems, this is a requirement for it, but it doesn't specify a fire alarm system before you put pressurization in there. Like if you had pressurization system in a fire alarm system, you only have to have smokes outside the smoke-proof enclosure. You'd have to have detection for the water flow switches. But if there's a lot of smoke detectors there, or a lot of other devices that are part of a fire alarm system, they shouldn't be required to be in a raceway when they're not there to serve the purpose of the ventilation system or the pressurization system. And that's kind of what the 2027 ICC proposal was. And we just took it, Kimberly and I worked on this and just basically took that verbatim and carried it over and presented it this way.
Yeah, thank you, David. Any other tag questions or comments then? Or questions for David?
Steve
Right.
here again. I'm sorry to beat this to death, but I'm just thinking, if you're an inspector, how are you going to know if cables are used for survivability of required critical circuits?
Well, right
and you
now,
won't have access. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
this isn't inspected at all right now. That's the problem. I'm on zone 1, been working best practice. I'm the co-chair with Todd Short formerly, but now Jason Chappell. And I brought this up in many, many meetings about how is this enforced, because it's a code section only in the IBC and the IMC. It's not in the NEC. So an electrical inspector going out is not looking for any of this. They're looking for workmanship. They're looking for violations. They're not looking for anything that's fire alarm related outside of that. For the pressurization, they're looking for the 2-hour protection, which is usually run inside of a continuous raceway, up inside of a shaft, inside the 2-hour envelope to get the fans. If it's an elevator pressurization, it's got to come up a shaft somewhere that they dedicate for it. But the rest of the fire alarm devices are not part of that pressurization system. I mean, if it's a standalone pressurization system, anything that'd be required because of the pressurization system would be in continuous raceway stuff or survivability. But 1-hour protection is running through a sprinkled building, essentially. Like if you're running through a corridor in a sprinkled building with a fire alarm detector, that meets the requirement. It's not directly required for the smoke pressurization system. It's required for the fire alarm system, vice versa. But there's nobody that's enforcing this right now. I mean, I do designs all day. This is how we do it. We go to competitors and we hear the same thing. Well, we didn't have to do this in the last job. We didn't have to do this in the last job. And I've been bringing this up, and they say, well, you got to talk to L&I or you got to talk to the city inspectors. And they don't have any correlation. They're not referencing this when they go out to do their inspections. They're looking for violations, workmanship, and basically what NEC states on there. And this is not covered in NEC at all.
So you're talking about electrical inspectors doing their inspections. That's when this gets picked up.
It doesn't get picked up at all.
No, you're saying it should. That's why we have the proposal for us now.
The proposal is for IBC and IBC for make it like when we're doing our designs, when it's submitted for a design or for review, that it's clearly called out how it should be installed. Whether or not an inspector, electrical inspector enforces that, I mean, that's not my world. I can't say, hey, you should have caught this or you should catch that. But when we stamp our design and we submit it and we stand behind our work and we basically say, hey, this system is going to survive it, this is what the AHJs can look for. They can reference this and call this out and say, hey, show me how you guys are doing protection like this. On a design that we would typically do, we would show raceway encased in concrete. We'd show where it's going up vertically with the 2-hour protection. We show how the circuits are isolated from the pressurization system versus what's part of the fire alarm system. But right now, I mean, you could call any AHJ and ask them if they've ever inspected this. The only AHJ that does any kind of electrical inspections for this kind of stuff is Bellevue with their city inspectors. And they have exceptions to what they actually consider raceway. They allow MC cable, which by definition in NEC is not a raceway. So it's like this really convoluted thing that we're trying to do is right by installing it right, but at the same time, that's not how every job is getting done. I see it when we do tenant improvements. I see it when I do plan review, that there's nobody enforcing this. So we're trying to give the AHJ, that community, something to actually lean on and not have a reference where it just says continuous raceway. Something that, hey, we want to see protection. I want to see survivability of these circuits and these systems, not just for just the fire alarm side, but also like this. For a fire pump, you're required to have 1 hour. I mean, a fire pump is a critical system. So, but that protection is required to be 1 hour for it. So it should be kind of standard when you're talking about like detectors that are not part of a smoke control system or required because of the smoke control system, I should say. And this is giving them a tool to do it. And that's kind of why the ICC's proposal says on it too, is saying that there's been a big loophole in this for a long time. And they're just trying to bridge that gap and give more options for builders and installers and plan reviewer and designers to basically provide a design that meets these requirements that's consistent across all boards, as opposed to let's just see what L&I catches, or let's see if somebody brings it up. But it's not being enforced at all.
So it's kind of a design standard. That's what I'm hearing. I'm just kind of worried about how it would be implemented in the field. If it's not now, I'm not sure. This is to me, it'd be very complicated to have all these different options, but I see where you're coming from and I appreciate your perspective.
Well, the ratings and stuff follow most sprinkled buildings. Like if you're looking at 1 hour rating, that's if you're running through a sprinkled building where it's not exposed, it's above a hard lid and a sprinkled ceiling for detection, because at the top of this says for detection and control circuits shall be protected. It's not specifically the ventilation circuits that are required part of 909, because that has specific 2 hour requirements for those all the way back. Same with the fire panel that's controlling these, or the graphic panel that's controlling these, it's all 2 hour protected for that. There's no variation for that. This is the stuff on the outlier of that seems to be encompassed on that. And when you put it on a, like, this is becoming really a big thing with the 501s, because they take the exception for the fifth floor, they add pressurization. These are wood frame buildings. You can't, the 2 hour circuits that are like the Vitalink and stuff, they're not listed to be installed in a wood frame building. They're listed to be secured to masonry, non-combustible material. That's not a wood frame building. And having to run 1/2-inch raceways through these buildings is very, very expensive. So the people that don't do this, that don't follow any part of the IMC, it's not being enforced. And they're also basically able to get a job because it's a cheaper option to a customer, and it just keeps perpetuating the same work and the same thing in different standards. This gives clear options that if you're not doing one of the following, then you're completely violating it.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Dave, I'm sorry, Tim.
I was just looking through the code because thank you for jumping on the call, David, because that was my concern, is why we weren't protecting with 2 hour. But I see now that 912 is specific to just these scenarios, and it makes sense to me to have as many options as possible. And like you say, and I'll speak from experience, I don't know, or I don't believe that this is being caught at all at this point. So providing some options that we can, grow on in the future if we need to, or amend in the future, is probably the right approach. And then, grow from there. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Andy?
Hey, David. Thank you for raising this. We definitely run into similar issues because this is not completely clear. I agree with your first statement there, or first sentence there, to clarify what the intent for this requirement is, which is for the detection and control functions, which talks about the firearm wiring, serving the initiating devices to activate the smoke control systems. My question would be on these options there. So I'm going to run a scenario here. for example, option number 4, which says construction having a fire systems rating of not less than 1 hour. So technically, if you have a stacked electrical room rated for 1 hour, what that section says would be you can have the cable run within that 1 hour stacked electrical room, like open cable without continuous raceway. And I'm thinking that that might lessen the intent of the original requirement, where it would require continuous raceway anyway. But like you said, it was already approved in the 2027 IBC IFC, correct? And if that's the case, then sooner or later the options will be available anyways for for the general population.
Yeah, and the NEC has requirements for protection of wire below 7 feet. So you can't just stack up an electrical room, and typically, I mean, we show everything that's going to be surface run in a continuous raceway anyways, because that's not essentially, I mean, behind a sheetrock sprinkled building, that's how we look at it as protected. If it's just open cabling in a sprinkled building, that is not what the intent is for it. This was something that I've been dealing with on the backside a long time, but when Ken Burley and I sat down and he was showing me, he brought forth the proposals, the F20 or F139, and how they voted on it 13-1 or 13-0, saying this has been a long haul. We're just trying to get it validated and say that for our designs, the people that are doing it right can basically compete with somebody that's not, when this is not being enforced at all.
Right, and we definitely agree with the concern of enforcement point of view, and we run into the same issue as well. We're doing a lot of smoke control design. When we get to this, we definitely look into the continuous raceway requirements as part of the reviewing the firearm drawings. And then technically, though, this is under the 909 section, so the smoke control special inspector should, I would say, again, should review these conditions or these requirements to be applied in the proper application. But I agree, not everything is inspected and properly verified in the field. But I just think that that this could be interpreted that we would potentially lessen the requirements of the continuous raceways. I'm not opposed to having the fact that if you have a, for example, dedicated shaft enclosure for the wiring, that would provide the same level of protection to the continuous raceways. I agree with that. But my example of running it, open cable in 1 hour stack electrical room, that was basically my concern, that somebody could interpret that and not provide the continuous raceways anyways within when the cables are inside that 1 hour stack electrical rooms.
But this is like the actual wiring for the ventilation system, that's still required to be 2 hours.
No, I agree. Yes.
I mean, that the whole part of that falls under a different section, but this is detection parts that are not associated with it.
Yeah, I'm talking about the firearm wiring for detection, which is the ones serving the initiating devices.
Okay. Mike, were you jumping in or lowered your hand?
I did have some questions, but I'm not a smoke control expert. Sounds like David is. A lot of information really fast. I guess my question would be on item 2 of the list. It says cables used for survivability. I didn't know these cables or these circuits were required for critical circuits. When you go to that same language in 909-20.6, that is the same UL listing, but it's for a 2 hour rating, not a 1 hour. And so I'm curious how you're pulling that 1 hour and where that came from. Is it just, that's where we're going to jump down to? I understand you have a code change proposal at the national level that you're saying is going in for 2027. However, 2027 is not complete yet. We haven't voted. I know it's probably gone through committee the one time, but it's not done. So I just have some questions on the 1 hour. And again, you're pulling this language or very similar language from other sections of the current code and changing time. But I'm not sure the UL standard does that. So I would need to probably have us research that a little more on UL 2196. And just kind of go from there. You bring new language into a certain section that's located elsewhere, and we're talking about survivability for computers going all crazy. For something you said technically isn't required to have survivability function because it's outside the smoke control system. So lots of questions, but again, I'm not a smoke control expert, but I hopefully you can answer some of those and some of the concerns. And when you're talking about not capturing some of this, these would be outside the commissioning requirements for smoke control systems, of course. So yeah, a few things there. Hopefully you can answer it. Thanks, David.
Yeah, this is the language I took out was actually their proposal for the 2027 ICC's proposal, the F-13924, and their reasoning was the committee stated that the reason for the approval for the proposals were there's a big hole in the code for a long time. Smoke control wiring is not always fire alarm wiring. In some cases it's BMS wiring or other power or wiring outside of what is called fire alarm system. And this level of protection is consistent with fire alarm passive protection requirements and controls that are currently in other sections. It provides additional options for survivability wiring that mirrors the language of other sections that are important for things like fire pump, which is like 913. That requires that same thing. The actual smoke control wiring is still required to be 2-hour protected. The listing that you're talking about, the electric protectivity service system circuits, the Vital Link and the stuff that's listed, FHIT 40, is meant to be put in a big building, a high-rise building that has concrete structures that you can support this wire with, or support the conduit system with. They call it a fire pump test or a hose test. So the Vital Link wiring, if you're getting buildings over like these 5/1s, these mid-rise buildings with pressurization, this only would work in a garage. But once you start going vertical, there's no non-combustible structure to attach this to, so it's not even applicable at that point.
Hopefully all the code officials can tie that together, especially when you're going to get something over a podium. And we just had a proposal that's going to allow wood podiums. So lots of information. Thanks, Dave.
Okay, go ahead, Tim.
I guess where I'm at with the proposal and hearing what the proponent is bringing forward is there is a loophole in the code when you start talking about connecting to wood frame structures. This gives options. They can still use the other options if they can, and it's within their listed ability to do so. So I guess I just see this as a fix, and it's going to be helpful no matter what. I do wish we had let's say an independent smoke control expert on here, but lacking that, I still feel like it's a good change to get in now, and then we can massage later. I would hate for us to perpetuate this not being in the code at all and no guidance given at all on what to do with it.
And do I understand correctly, this has already moved through the fire tag? And so we're looking at this in parallel, right?
Correct. And I have notes on there that we're looking to schedule correlation meetings on these proposals. So at the moment it's wrapped up at the fire tag, but we're talking about it. And then I guess if we have more questions, we can always bring the fire, the building, and the mechanical groups together to talk about it. I'm sure it'll be a straightforward conversation.
Okay. So with that, does the tag have a motion?
Can I make a motion to defer this to a correlation meeting between the fire code and the mechanical code?
Without a recommendation? Moving forward to the correlation without a recommendation from the IBC tag?
Yes.
Okay. To a second for Tim's motion?
I'll second that. Stephen here.
Okay. As we're in discussion here, Dustin, does that create any problems procedurally?
No, I don't think it creates any procedural problems. I would like to make sure the mechanical tag has looked at this or is about to look at this. And then bring everybody together after they've had that initial kind of digestion period. And since we're looking at not making the November council meeting with all the proposals, I don't think there's going to be a huge impact on us as far as having issues scheduling that with other stuff going on.
Okay. All right. Any other comments? Okay, the motion is to defer to the correlation committee. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, then forgot the number. Oh,
We're on 12. That's a Ken Brulette for another chapter 9 proposal.
Well, no, I'm sorry, I was just finished off in 074, but I just wanted to thank the proponent, David, for educating us, so thank you.
Yes.
Sorry I couldn't be here earlier. I was in a meeting. I was trying to get here as fast as I could.
Oh, you came in just the right time, so perfect. Thank you. Okay, now Dustin, yes, let's go on to Ken's next one, which is 071.
We've got 4 minutes left in the meeting, so we'll
Oh, we do. Okay, let's not do that then. I mean, it's welcome to introduce it, but I think all the things we might have Ken available to us if we just.
Yeah.
He's
got his name on several of these ones in the later part of our agenda here. I think it might be best to table the rest of what we have on our agenda for the future.
Yeah, Roger, go ahead.
Yeah, Dustin, I don't remember if I asked you about this in the IBC tag or the IFC tag, but is there some place that we have a list of all of the remaining, kind of see where we're at?
Yes.
Or how many are still outstanding, which ones we've sent along? Can you direct us to where that's located?
Well, I believe that you asked that for at the last fire tag meeting, and I wanted to make sure I was giving you an up-to-date list before I sent that out to everybody. So the best place online to go to where this will be published is in the code adoption page. But after today's meeting, I'm real close to having this right up to date with what we've done here today. So expect here later today, I'll shoot out a list. And are you looking for all proposals across all the codes for group 1? Or are you looking for just the
Well, I'm looking for the IBC tag to have a list, just so we know how much more work we've got to do to get through these, and then same for the IFC tag. So
I have both of those essentially ready to go after today's meeting. I got to do a couple little cleanups, and I should be able to get that out to you guys tonight.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. It'll be published on the 2024 code adoption tab of our page on the website.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you, Dustin. Thank you, Roger. And just jumping in the next meeting, we'll continue with on this agenda, that order there, including the wobble ones likely, because they'll be back from the ICC, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. We will, I think we're moving, next meeting is October 31st we're gonna do the same 3-hour push, right? 1 to 4.
Yep. Just in case, I was wanted to put it out there, does anybody need to get out of here earlier to go put paint on their kids' faces or anything like that? We could entertain. It's an unofficial holiday, and maybe people want to get out a little earlier. We could shift the meeting time if you want, but I'm perfectly fine leaving it where it is. I just want to throw it out there.
I'm just to let the tag know, I'm teaching a class next week, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to break away to make the meeting.
Lance, are there any that you want to make sure you're part of? Do you now want to hear the fire?
I'll take a look. I'll take a look of them and send a note out.
Okay. There are a couple fire ones on there, so. Okay. Well, not hearing any requests for Dustin. Do you want us to move forward a little bit if we can?
No, I don't have any preference. It was just mentioned by some folks that have kids within the staff, but it's okay.
Well, if it's been requested, I mean, we can entertain it for, would anyone be opposed to 12 to 3? Well, let's propose that then. Go ahead, Tim.
Do we need a motion to move it to 12 to 3, or how does that work?
I don't think so.
No,
Okay.
we're just scheduling the next meeting.
And if anyone has concerns, please email Dustin and me, and we'll be transparent. So, okay. Thank you, everyone. With that, we are adjourned.
All right. Thanks everybody for the work today.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.